Good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And you know, one of the real Achilles heels of the ANC government is that it has two partners, the South African Communist Party and Cosatu, who have a huge influence on their decision making. And when Eskom was looking for a new CEO just a few weeks ago, it approached 14 different black potential CEOs, and they all turned it down for one reason: political interference. And of course, you now got Doreta, who's a white fellow, who's now trying to turn Eskom around, and you can see he's starting to face exactly what these other guys were talking about. But it gets worse. At least Eskom is still not in administration or business rescue, even though it's basically insolvent when you think about it. South African Airways. I reported the other day that they're cutting a whole lot of their flights, and that's going to mean over 1,000 of their staff are probably going to be retrenched. So, what happens? Out come the South African Communist Party. Yep. Basically, another shade of the ANC. They're like a major partner in the ANC government. This is where the political interference comes in state-owned enterprise, and this is why South Africa is going to the dogs. The South African Communist Party wants the most recent plans announced by the Joint Business Rescue Practitioners of embattled state-owned airline South African Airways to be rescinded as a matter of urgency. In other words, the suggestion that flights are going to be cancelled, South African Communist Party has come in and said, nah, not going to work, you can't do that. This is where political interference comes in South Africa. In a statement, the South African Communist Party calls for workers' rights to be fully protected while at the same time pursuing the turnaround of South African Airways. It describes alleged job cuts that could take place at South African Airways as part of an attempt by the business rescue practitioners or planners to make the airline sustainable as untenable, and called for alternatives to be found after meaningful consultation with unions, i.e. Cosatu, the ANC government's other partners in this triumvirate. This is why it's unworkable. You know, you've got the business rescue practitioners trying to save South African Airways, and you've got these dumbos coming in and saying, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. And of course, that's why it fails. But, you know, the L factor is not high when it comes to certain members of the community. South African Airways business rescue practitioners Les Madison and Siviwe Dongwana announced earlier this week that as from the end of February, the airline will be cancelling some routes and reducing some frequencies, both domestically and internationally. For example, all of its domestic routes, apart from Johannesburg to Cape Town, will be cancelled, it was announced. Domestic routes operational by Mango will, however, not be affected by the changes. The business rescue practitioners emphasized that this is aimed at supporting South African Airways' transformation into a sustainable and profitable business and in line with the urgent action required to conserve cash. A reliable source said that none of these cancelled routes are actually profitable. So it makes sense that you cancel it, doesn't it, if you're trying to save the state-owned enterprise? But of course, once again, this is where political interference comes in. At the same time, an aviation expert said that the plan to cancel a number of routes and reduce some frequencies could leave a gap in supply, which in turn could lead to increased airfares for consumers, as it is not a given that it will be filled by other airlines. The South African Communist Party commented that South African Airways is a network carrier, not a point-to-point carrier. It is inconceivable that South African Airways will thrive in serving the remaining international destinations without serving its own domestic market, except for only one route, the Johannesburg and Cape Town route. It accuses the business rescue practitioners' announcement of the intended route cancellations giving way to private profit interests and making it extremely difficult for South African Airways to re-establish itself as part of its desired turnaround on these domestic routes. You know, who would want to take over a position of trying to save a state-owned enterprise in South Africa? Because these other parts of the ANC are just, you know, they're just out of control. The South African Communist Party suggests that the business rescue practitioners should rather try to increase the load factors on South African Airways flights, especially the domestic routes, essentially filling the seats by, in its view, reducing flights on those routes but not cancelling them altogether. The South African Communist Party is not satisfied with the rights that the business rescue process provides the business rescue practitioners in their mandate to try and make cash-strapped South African Airways sustainable, and would rather see government intervene in the process in the national interest. Here comes the intervention. It's crazy. Even President Cyril Ramaphosa on Friday indicated his unhappiness with the business rescue practitioners' plan for route cuts and reduced frequencies, saying government does not agree with this plan and will discuss the matter with the business rescue practitioners. Well, you know, I have a message for Ramaphosa, who's effectively been either deputy president or president for close on 10 years now. So he's had a huge role to play in the failure of South African Airways. And that can be brought down to one simple fact, and that is black economic empowerment. BEE, that is destroying South Africa. And anyone from Germany who's thinking of investing in South Africa, you got rocks in your head, because your companies or your businesses you set up here will have to be BEE compliant. And guess who's going to be knocking on your door as soon as you set up a business here? One of the well-connected ANC cadres who will have a shelf company, just like that woman who worked with AAR through South African Airways Technical, 1.8 billion rands worth of business where she got an 8% cut for doing nothing just because she made that overseas company BEE compliant. So, for those German companies who are thinking of setting up in South Africa, consider this fact. You set yourself up and you've got not enough black people working for you, and that's pretty common in South Africa when business is set up, which means that because you're not BEE compliant, you get nothing. You get left out of the picture. Until this is where the scam comes in, okay? There you are wondering how you're actually going to do business with, let's say, Eskom or with South African Airways or with Denel or with Transnet because you're not BEE compliant. This is where the scam comes in. The ANC send one of their well-connected cadres to your office. They've got a shelf company. They're the owner. They say, look, if you give me X percentage of your business in South Africa, because you'll then be BEE compliant, you can start doing business with these other guys, can't you? And of course, that ANC cadre does exceptionally well. And there's no better example of this than one Cyril Ramaphosa, who made his billions this way. It's a scam. It's fraud. It's corruption. It's just legalized by law brought in by the ANC government. And as I said, anyone from outside South Africa who's thinking of investing in South Africa, good luck to you, because you're going to fall on your ass, I can tell you right now. Anyway, let's get back to the situation here, because South African Airways is a classic example of what we're talking about here. Even President Cyril Ramaphosa on Friday indicated his unhappiness with the business rescue practitioners' plan for route cuts and reduced frequencies, saying government does not agree with his plan and will discuss the matter with the business rescue practitioners. Obviously, he has been briefed by his mates here, South African Communist Party and Cosatu in the background. Subsequent to Ramaphosa's indicating his unhappiness, the Ministry of Public Enterprises issued a statement saying government is concerned that recent decisions concerning South African Airways have caused market and customer uncertainty that may jeopardize the long-term future of the airline, indicating that a review of the business rescue practitioners' recent announcement is necessary. You want political interference? You got it. Ahead of South African Airways going into business rescue in December last year, it was reported about concerns in the aviation industry that government might try to interfere with the business rescue practitioners in the execution of their duties to try and see if South African Airways can indeed become sustainable. And here you have the proof. An international aviation expert who preferred to remain anonymous said on Saturday that government interference shows that they do not understand the problem at hand. Well, it's a gangster state. They haven't cleaned out South African Airways enough yet. The business rescue practitioners are really trying to save South African Airways, but they must keep a free hand, otherwise South African Airways is not rescuable. Airlink can jump in on cancelled domestic routes, and Mango, Safare and Kulula are well positioned to serve short-haul routes, he said. So the cancellations do not hurt the public in the meantime. And of course, we heard that last week another airline, another state-owned enterprise, South African Express, is now also under administration. As I said a couple of months ago, what's happening at South African Airways is the canary in the cage, and you can see how it's just following the same process where they put up this idea of trying to save it, and then the politicians get involved and they interfere with the people who are trying to save it, and the whole thing just goes pear-shaped, which is what's going to happen with South African Airways. Okay, so here we go again. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa, NUMSA, has warned earlier that South African Airways intends to accelerate plans to reduce its wage bill. Well, of course they do. They've got to save the organisation. Just recently, the state-owned development bank of Southern Africa has come to the rescue of South African Airways with a 3.5 billion rand funding lifeline to avert the airline's total collapse. The intended cancellation of certain domestic routes by South African Airways will, according to NUMSA and the South African Cabin Crews Association, have a devastating impact on workers and their families, because it effectively means that South African Airways in Port Elizabeth, Durban and East London will be closed down and workers will be retrenched. That's what you do when you're trying to rescue a business that's kind of bankrupt. You know, you've got to do something. The National Transport Movement, or NTM, said earlier that after it had met with the business rescue practitioners, it is ready to deal the question of restructuring in terms of the Labour Relations Act, aiming to, where applicable, have the redeployment of employees to subsidiaries of South African Airways, government departments, other South African Airways divisions, go on early retirement, being reskilled or obtaining temporary employment. Tabassum Kadir, CEO of Uprise Africa and former co-chair of the grounded Skywise Airlines, says there is no magic wand in the business rescue process. In her view, the South African Airways business rescue practitioners' decision to cancel certain routes to manage the airline's finances until it receives a new capital injection may be a good financial decision for the short term. At the same time, she feels a state-owned airline should be obliged to service routes to stimulate local commercial activity. using cost recovery pricing. Likewise, flying to global non-priority countries could have some strategic significance for South Africa. She said, "It is also a harsh reality that the South African government can no longer afford to keep its national airline afloat. Neither should South African taxpayers be expected to," she comments. She therefore suggests that the concept of equity crowdfunding be looked into as an option to perhaps address South African Airways' financial woes. Wikipedia defines equity crowdfunding as a mechanism that enables broad groups of investors to fund startup companies and small businesses in return for equity. Investors give money to a business and receive ownership of a small piece of that business. In October last year, before South African Airways went into business rescue in December, government announced that it would help South African Airways repay its 9.2 billion rand debt over the next 3 years. A formal business rescue plan is set to be submitted by the business rescue practitioners by the end of the month. At the time of publication, the business rescue practitioners had not responded. Now, this is a classic example of government interference in a group of professional people who are trying to rescue a state-owned enterprise that has been totally screwed up by said government. And here they are going in for a second bite to screw it up. All right, guys, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. Ring the bell for the updates. Please like this video, please share this video, and above all, please stay safe.